Well, we're still in Chama, New Mexico.
Yes.
And we're sort of wandering around the freight yards.
Yeah, it kind of makes me nervous even to this day to wander around freight yards, even though we're invited guests.
Well, as kids, wasn't that the funnest thing?
Yes, my little hometown, we had this little old beat-up depot, and I remember nosing around down there and peeking in the windows and getting ran off. Get out of there!
Get out of there. And that was this railroad, the Rio Grande.
It was the Rio Grande. It was called the Marysville branch.
And for me, it was the Union Pacific. I would, my aunt lived on one side of the the Union Pacific yards, and my great-grandmother's house was on the other side, and to get between the two, you had to cut through the switching yard.
Oh my, I hope one of them wasn't on the wrong side of the tracks.
Oh, my great-grandmother was.
I love her already.
But just wandering around, and nobody seemed to think that much of it. We would get chased off eventually by the railroad police.
Right.
But it was just fun to nose around, and I would always have my nose stuck in some sort of switch lantern.
Right.
Now, on this particular day, when the daily passenger train rolled into Chama, it was really late because they had a hot box.
A hot box.
Yeah, well, we know the brakes go to crap up on the hill, but one of the bearings was overheating, and they had to stop up there and let it cool off. But one of these two cars coming up right here, you can see it smoking now.
Oh, look at that. Wow.
But the bearing was just on the verge of completely going, and they had to spend some time letting it cool off. And then once they rolled into town, well, it was still practically on fire. I've actually seen these things catch fire.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was a significant delay for the train because
intense.
No, the tents are at the other end of the yard. I've seen this get so hot it sets fire to a wooden car.
Oh dear.
Well, I think our two favorite railroad yards to nose around in are the Nevada Northern, Ely, Nevada,
right,
and Chama.
Yeah,
right here.
They're cool.
Well, there are no fences.
Nope.
And nobody seems to care. It's like, yeah, go ahead and explore around. Don't break anything and don't steal anything. But other than the actual back part of the roundhouse, go wherever you want.
Yeah.
Look at whatever you want. Just spend time nosing around and having a great time. And the really cool thing here at Chama, I mean, it's kind of like that at Antonito as well, but here at Chama, the Friends of the Cumbres and Toltec really have a lot of equipment just kind of here in the yard. So the Friends of the Cumbres and Toltec are going through and restoring everything.
Oh, good.
Well, it's, they're kind of prioritizing things.
Yeah.
But I think their ultimate goal, if you were to say what is their ultimate goal, in terms of all the freight equipment and unused structures, to stabilize them and whenever possible, completely restore them.
Oh, that's great.
So we've actually got two completely different entities here. The railroad,
right,
which is owned by the states of New Mexico and Colorado, and they have to operate over here at a profit.
Yes.
I mean, it's a regular scenic railroad, and they take care of all the steam engines and the passenger equipment. And then the friends of the Cumbres and Toltec get to use the railroad and do things like this, bring in locomotives. They're the ones putting together the entire gathering of Victorian locomotives.
Well, I'd say it's a win-win situation in that case.
It's a total win-win situation, but they do have to strike certain, arrangements, agreements.
Yes.
So that they don't get in the way of the railroad, and the railroad is more than happy to let them work on this equipment and even run it on their tracks, provided they don't mess up their operations.
Right.
This is really neat. These guys are restoring this speeder.
That's neat. I'd like to have one of those.
I had one for a while.
Fun.
It was not narrow gauge, but it was almost this exact same model of Fairmont speeder. And they've got this thing completely dialed in. It's absolutely perfect, except for one small problem.
Yeah, what's that?
It wouldn't start.
Oh, what?
Yeah, so it's like, check the spark, check the fuel. Just some tiny little thing. Cause,
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
Probably.
And we looked at these guys restoring this boxcar.
That was going together in a hurry.
Boy, they really knocked this stuff out. And these guys spend at least 1 week, 1 week working, 1 week screwing around. This lady does the lettering.
I love it. Isn't that cool?
Once they get the cars restored, and then they put a spray paint color on there, and then she comes in. And this is the original way that the Rio Grande used to do their lettering, with these stencils.
Neat.
And she makes the stencils on one of those cutting machines, and then some of them she just cuts out by hand. And then for some of the little finer details, she just goes in with her paintbrush and does that.
That is awesome.
But look how many freight cars, as you go around the yards here.
There's a few.
There's quite a few.
Yes.
There's a ton that need work.
Yep.
But there's a whole bunch that they have completely restored. And they've got this neat little museum car.
Right.
They've just put some fun artifacts in here, but I was kind of more intrigued by the car. This is one of our favorite cars.
Yes.
The drop bottom gondola, and here's a link to a movie, Our Friend Don.
Yes, I never see a drop bottom gondola. I immediately think of Don.
Well, he completely scratch built one of these in 1/2 inch scale.
Right.
The only thing he didn't scratch build were the actual wheels.
Yes.
Axles, everything.
And it works.
It works.
The parts work, everything.
Everything. And this is one of those sheep cars. Looks like a cattle car, but if you look closely, it's a double decker. And they just pulled 2 of these off the reservation.
Yes.
And your favorite,
The caboose.
the caboose.
The caboose.
And they've reconstructed several different cabooses here.
Is it caboose or caboose?
It would be caboose, I guess, if it's multiples. But look at all the different cattle and sheep cars here. And there's some maintenance equipment. Now, this equipment down here is still sort of awaiting.
I can see that.
But it doesn't stop them from using it.
Right.
It's fine. Here's a drop bottom gone that I think they went through a few years ago, and since then it's
Weathered.
It's yeah. That I would work really hard getting that kind of weather. And this is really neat. This is a pipe gone.
A pipe.
Oh, it's
gone.
actually 2 pipe gons. So at the very end of this railroad, it was oil. They discovered oil, and that's what saved the railroad. And how do you haul 40-foot lengths of pipe on a 30-foot car?
That's a good question.
Well, you knock the ends out of a gondola.
Oh.
You lay them in there.
Well, there you go.
And you let the long ends overhang a flat car.
That's why they don't want you to stand too close to a train.
Yep. And well, as it goes around a corner, that
You
also
might.
rips the brake wheel off. So
Yeah.
then they lowered the brake wheels. But there it is. There's 2 pipe gons, and these are rough.
Yeah, a little bit.
But
A little
I would
weathering there.
model them in that condition.
Sure.
But I think the friends will not leave them in this condition. At some point in time, they'll go through all of this equipment and make it like brand new.
That's awesome.
Isn't that cool?
That's great.
But there's some really, really interesting equipment around here. It's just the stuff that was on the railroad, like this Rio Grande Southern. When everything was closing down, some stuff just sort of ended up over here, and now these guys have it. And isn't that cool?
That is awesome.
And it isn't all train stuff. Check out this fire truck.
That is interesting.
Isn't that fun?
My.
It's the railroad's fire truck.
Yes.
But, when you're running steam locomotives and you have wood structures and so on, now there are switch lanterns.
Uh-huh.
When I was a kid going through the UP yards, I would have my nose right in these things, and people say, what's your fascination with switch lanterns?
Everything.
Everything. Well, if I had to explain it, they'd never understand. You know, it's just either you get it and you love switch lanterns, or you look at them and you go, I don't know, I don't get it. Anyway, I'm really fascinated by a lot of this equipment because I want to model it.
Right.
Or I've already modeled it.
That's true.
Does this look familiar?
It certainly does.
Yeah, I built this. It was a different car number. I wanted to build the one that they blew up in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but same car.
It is, it is.
And here's one that was sort of cosmetically restored. They don't seem to be running it, but it's the short railway post office.
Yes.
It's kind of a combine, actually. It's got baggage at one end and post office at the other end. And it's just one of my favorite passenger cars on the narrow gauge.
I'll bet Eric's in there sorting the mail.
He is. That was the guy I put in my car, was a guy named Eric. Oh, and here's 483.
Yes.
A K36 locomotive. Not in good shape.
Why is the tender white?
Well, they put primer on it to protect it, which is nice.
I see.
But boy, does this need a lot of work. So the friends have kind of been, you know, because the railroad's going, well, we don't think it's salvageable, but if you guys want to try it, you have at it. I'll bet they get it running at some point. And this is 492. That's a K37 locomotive. And the railroad has 4 of these.
Oh.
And 3 of them are in similar condition to this one. Actually, this one's had quite a bit of work done on it. It doesn't look like much right now.
Not too much, no.
2 of them are just sort of sidetracked. One is up in Antonito. I guess 2 of them are up in Antonito. And then this one is here. And then they've actually got a 4th one of these, this one, 497.
Oh, there it is.
They traded with the Durango Silverton. The Durango Silverton said this guy was chewing up their track. So they gave them an unrestored K36 in exchange for this K37. And I think it runs, but they don't run it.
Not if it chews up track.
Well, over on this railroad, I don't think it would. So I don't know the whole story. If you do, jump into the comments window, but I'm pretty sure this is in operating condition. But the backbone of the railroad are 4 of these.
I see.
K-
At least that one, it didn't go choo-choo.
No, it did. But the K36s, they've got 4 of these. That they use on a daily basis, and of course the 489 has been converted to run on oil, and we talked about that in previous shows. This is neat, a flanger.
A flanger.
We are going to have one of these on our model railroad.
I guess so.
I'm just not sure if I want to scratch build it or find a brass one, but that'd be the only 2 ways you'd get one of these.
Yep.
But it's kind of like a snowplow, could be used for several different things. But it's for getting right down up against the rails.
Yeah, I would suppose so.
Hence the name flanger. Super heavy. All this weight to keep it from derailing if it's going through snow or anything. And then you just drag it behind a locomotive and it clears out the flangeways. They would quite often use this in conjunction with a rotary snowplow.
It makes sense.
Because the rotary can't get down right to the rails and down into the flangeways where this little guy can. And so they just put it behind the locomotives and tow it along and have it clear out the flangeways.
Well, that's neat.
And the friends have completely restored this.
That's awesome.
And they actually haul it out on the line from time to time just for a demonstration.
Well, I bet they have to once in a while.
And speaking of flangers, now this is a Jordan spreader. And we saw that one up at the Nevada Northern.
Yes.
It's an earlier version of this. But this is sort of an overgrown version of a flanger.
Oh, my.
But there's an operator here in the front. The flanger doesn't have an operator, but somebody actually rides in the front of this and can actually operate these huge plows with rams, which I think run on steam. And there's a lot of different mechanism here. Again, I'm not 100% sure how that works, but I'm pretty sure these big rams run on steam, and then the operator can move those big blades out, and you can see it can get quite wide.
Right.
So you can actually use it for clearing out the ditches along the side of the track, hence the name a ditcher sometimes.
Ditcher. Oh, okay, gotcha.
And a Jordan spreader,
spreader.
because you can use it for spreading ballast. You can use it for a lot of different things.
Well, that's handy.
But they were quite often just used as a snowplow,
Right.
because that's a great snowplow.
Oh, yeah.
And for, half of the year, that would be the thing. They've got a wheel car here.
Yes, look
Because
at that.
you need to haul spare wheels around from shop to shop. And so the maintenance department had wheel cars, and they've restored this wheel car. And that's really cool. Again, I think I want to build a model of one of those at some point in time. They've got a whole bunch of maintenance equipment. This is up at Antonito. The Friends have better facilities at Antonito. They've got these huge shops.
Right.
And this big, sort of like a pole barn, this big metal industrial building. And they keep a lot of their maintenance of way equipment in here. And then other things that they've restored, because what's the point in restoring something and then have the weather tear it apart again?
Right.
Now this is, and we're going to do a show later on this, but this is something that they completely restored, a pile driver.
Aren't they interesting?
Isn't that just the neatest darn thing? And so up at Antonito, they fired up the pile driver and drove a pile. Does sound
yeah, okay.
Anyway, they drove a pile into the ground just to demonstrate. A post, there you go. Set this up with it. They were going to drive a post into the ground with this thing. But it's all completely restored, and it runs on steam from the locomotive. And you have to run a steam line from the locomotive up to this machine. And it raises up this huge hammer, and then the hammer is used to drive essentially a power pole, something the size of a telephone pole.
Yeah, it's the size of a power pole.
Into the ground. This is another interesting thing. This is part of their snow removal train for the rotary snowplow, but they were using it as an auxiliary water car.
Yes.
Because the wood-burning locomotives needed to stop at Lava Tank, and Lava Tank doesn't work anymore. So they were using one of their maintenance cars for that.
Well, that's handy. Double use, yeah.
Double use. And here is, I think, the coolest thing that they have restored. It's the OY.
Oi?
Oi.
The Oi car.
The OY Rotary Snowplow. And they actually take this out, usually in the spring. It's their snow drifts up at the top of Cumbres Pass.
Yes.
And they'll fire this thing up, and everybody shows up, and they sell tickets, and it's a photo special and everything. And I'd really love to do that one of these years.
Yes.
But the operator for this rides up in the front, and then using whistle signals tells several locomotives, because this thing doesn't power itself, it has to be pushed. It has its own boiler and everything to spin the blades. Notice that the tender has a cover.
I've noticed that.
Well, it throws snow all over the place,
yeah.
and it's a winter, so you're not going to get a lot of use out of your coal if it's all covered with snow. Even. So they've got a cover.
They built a coal house for the tender
on top of here. But this goes at the front of the train. I've seen pictures back in the day of this thing being pushed by as many as 6 locomotives. Look at the strength of the wheel trucks. They're weighted.
Massive, yeah.
Because otherwise they'll ride up on top of the snow on the flangeways and derail. So no suspension. No springs or anything.
Not necessary.
Because it doesn't go very fast.
Mm-mm.
It just creeps along.
Yep.
And then some of the mechanism, the actual steam cylinders and everything are behind these doors.
Oh.
And so then you have to have access to get to the equipment there for lubrication and whatnot.
Right.
Anyway, the operator sits up at the front there and runs the plow and can reverse the direction of that. And the fireman is back here at the back of the unit keeping the fire burning.
Yes.
And when they're out here shoveling, they're completely out in the elements in the middle of winter.
Yes.
But as hot as these boilers are, I bet they enjoyed being.
I was just going to say, at least their front half would be really warm.
Because you could go inside and warm up, but you'd really warm up. Anyway, this is the business end.
Yep.
And that whole thing spins. Giant snowblower.
It reminds me of James and the Giant Peach when that big shark came and
Yeah.
About the same kind of apparatus.
About the same, yeah. Or Yeah. Anyway.
Oof.
It's a snowblower. It's just a really
It won't
big,
eat ya.
vicious snowblower, and the operator can reverse the direction of these blades and throw the snow to the right or throw the snow to the left, and then whistle and whistle to tell the locomotives to go forward, pull me back, go forward, and that's called bucking the snow, where you just keep ramming this thing into the snow and then backing up and ramming it in.
Sounds like clearing a driveway.
Exactly the same idea,
Yeah.
only the throttle is being run by a whole series of locomotive engineers behind you.
Yes.
So, and there was no radios back then.
Nope.
And no walkie-talkies or anything. So you do whistles.
Yes. Whistle signals.
Whistle signals to the locomotives. Now this is OM.
OM, OA, and OM.
I only know of 3 wooden rotaries, one on the Nevada Northern and 2 here. This one is not in very good shape.
No.
But I don't think they really are all that keen on restoring it. I bet they restore it someday, but where they have an absolutely perfectly restored version of this, this one just sort of languishes out here.
Right.
But I'll bet you someday.
Someday they might
Someday,
decide to start on it.
when they've got everything else, it's like let's get on to that other rotary. It's always nice to have a spare.
Yes. Oh, what in the...
But there's other. This is a tender tank. Just spare stuff. Now this is sort of interesting. The water tank, and it's like, do they have anything to do with working on? Well, see, some of this equipment, because it's used by the railroad, the friends are sort of off limits.
Oh.
And this is such a neat water tank. It's got a spout on either side, but it's not like they can do anything with it or, tell the railroad, just shut down for a month. We're going to be messing with the water tank. So this is one of those areas of I can't say conflict, but overlapping interest.
There you go. That's a good way to put it.
And so the railroad mostly manages the big water tank here. But it's a very unique Rio Grande water tank in that it has a spout on either side.
I like it.
Oh, I love it. I love these Rio Grande water tanks. Again, we need to model one.
Yeah, with 2 spouts.
With 2 spouts. Now, off in the distance here is something that I definitely plan on modeling, and that's the oil loading platform for filling up the tank cars.
Oh, neat.
Now, again, the railroad was saved in the 1960s when they discovered oil down here.
Wow.
And they were using these tank cars to move oil from this loading platform here up to the refinery at Alamosa. And when the refinery burned down in 1968, that put an end to all of this.
Oh, dear.
And that put an end to the railroad, because at that point there was no reason for the railroad to survive. So fortunately, 2 states took it over. But this was where, there isn't much to it, but this is where the tank cars were loaded.
Wow.
For the trip up to Alamosa. And I really want to model this. The friends have gone through here and given it a really nice cosmetic restoration. There's no point fixing it up to work because there's no oil.
Right. Well, it makes a bit of interesting history.
It's some great history. Now, one of the really neat things they did is all of these tank cars got sold off to the White Pass. The White Pass in Yukon.
Oh.
And it's like, well, we need tank cars to spot at our tank platform, and can we get some of these back?
Ah.
And I think they were able to purchase 6 of them.
6 of them.
I'm not sure the number. If you know, jump into the comments. But I think they were able to purchase 6 of these back. And there's 2 of them.
Well, that's neat.
Spotted right there. And then they'll put them into demonstration trains and photo specials and use them in different ways. But that's just so cool that they were able to get some of the tank cars back and then go through the oil loading platform here and get that. Look at this mess underneath there.
I remember seeing those kind of messes.
Spilled oil.
Yes.
An environmental disaster.
Yes.
I took careful pictures because I want to model that.
Yes, I remember seeing it in garages years ago. They mechanic on cars.
Oh, yeah. Nobody was just yuck. It's just a mixture of dirt and oil.
Yes, and time.
Yeah, and this is thick. This is probably a foot thick in the middle.
It has a unique smell, too.
Well, anyway, this has been a fun sort of just side excursion here
Right.
at the Gathering of Victorian Locomotives.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got plenty more little things to do while we're here.
Right.
But you got to take time to wander the freight yards. We're going to take a deep dive on the coaling tower here.
Yes, that guy there.
Because they did a whole demonstration for us. And this actually was at the top of my list of reasons why I wanted to come here.
Absolutely.
And so next week, we're going to do a really deep dive into the coaling tower and show its entire functionality. And because, again, the friends have gone through and got everything working.
Right. And how many people have been inside of a coaling tower, you know?
Yeah, and it's just fascinating.
This is awesome.
It's just fascinating. And so this is one of the main reasons for coming. But there were a lot of reasons
yes. Oh,
for
hey.
coming. Because look at that.
Yes.
How often do you get to see the Glen Brook tied up at the sand house at the Chama yards? Well, sadly, we don't get to wander the actual freight yards anymore.
No.
But at least there's a couple of old freight yards at museums
Right.
that have an open door policy.
Right.
And fortunately, this is one of them.
I'm glad. Usually I'm really, really careful, you know, you just have to be. But yeah, I like wandering around.
It's fun. Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, pop on over to the channel. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. And the way to do that is with the blue button right there. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring, and we will see you here on Tuesday with a collectible thing.
Oh boy. We'll see ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.